Hey everyone, welcome back. If you haven't watched the first part yet, be sure to check it out. The link's in the description. Now, let's dive right into the final chapter. Miami was a different kind of hell. The humidity hit me like a wall when we landed. The neon lights reflected off the wet streets, giving everything a sickly, artificial glow. The city was beautiful, but beneath that veneer of luxury and glamour, it was rotting. Another paradise built on violence and corruption. And Mateo Salazar? He thought this city would protect him. He was wrong. The plan. We weren't here to negotiate. There would be no subtlety, no games. Mateo had made his threat. He was going to pay for it in blood, with a price even higher than what he'd asked for. I had no interest in creeping through the shadows anymore. I was done with that. I wanted him to see me coming. I wanted him to understand that the price of defying me was death. Lopez and I had a plan, and it was simple. Find Mateo. Kill him. Make the city burn in the process. We didn't waste time. We hit his mansion first. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. A sprawling compound hidden behind iron gates and guarded by men with itchy trigger fingers. But guards are only as good as the people they work for. We arrived in the dead of night, our SUVs creeping along the winding path toward the estate. My heartbeat steady, my focus razor-sharp. As soon as the gates opened, it was chaos. Lopez was first out of the car, unloading a salvo of bullets into the guards at the entrance, his assault rifle roaring in the silence. The gates were still swinging open when I kicked in the front door. I didn't hesitate. I was already on the move, cutting down anyone in my path. The house felt like a tomb, quiet, empty, waiting for death to come. I found Mateo's men scattered throughout, trying to organize some form of resistance, but it was too late. They were already dead before they even realized who had come for them. By the time we reached the main hall, the mansion was drenched in blood. Bodies stacked up like discarded trash. Still no Mateo. He was fast, too fast for someone who thought they were untouchable. He must have known I was coming, because the moment we breached the mansion, he was already gone. The only trace left behind was his personal helicopter, now disappearing into the night sky. I was done playing games. We had one option. Lopez, Diego, and I took to the air. We had a stolen military-grade chopper on standby. I held the controls while Lopez manned the mounted guns. Diego was back there, cleaning his shotgun, the usual smirk missing from his face. We were all focused. We tracked Mateo's helicopter on radar. It wasn't hard. His escape wasn't as clean as he thought. He wasn't flying under the radar. By the time we caught up, Mateo's chopper was hovering over a yacht in the middle of Biscayne Bay. The moonlight reflected off the water, a peaceful, calm scene in stark contrast to the war we were about to unleash. I didn't waste time with niceties. I aimed the chopper toward his yacht, locking on with the mounted gun. The rapid fire unleashed a storm of bullets, tearing through the metal, causing sparks and debris to explode in all directions. Mateo's men scrambled, panicked, but they were nothing compared to us. We landed, and it was a bloodbath. I jumped out first, charging onto the yacht, my boots hitting the deck with a heavy thud. I saw Mateo almost immediately, standing near the edge, his face twisted in rage. "You came all the way here for this?" he sneered. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled my gun and shot his right-hand man in the head, the body crumpling to the floor in a lifeless heap. Mateo's eyes narrowed. "You think this is over, Ethan? You think you've won?" I stepped forward. "You should have stayed dead, Mateo." He pulled his own gun, but I was faster. A shot to the chest sent him stumbling back, blood spilling out in rapid pulses. The fight was over, but Mateo didn't fall easily. He smirked, despite the pain, and whispered, "You won't make it out alive." I didn't have time for his games. I stepped up to him and put a bullet in his head, splattering his brains against the floor. The yacht was silent after that. The war was over. The yacht sank into the bay, the remnants of Mateo's empire with it. Miami had burned. Bodies had been left in the wake of our destruction, but it didn't matter. The Salazar bloodline was finished. I walked away from the wreckage. Lopez and Diego were right behind me, and as I stared out over the water, I thought about what had been lost, what had been gained. My family was safe. That was the only thing that mattered. But even though Mateo was gone, I knew better than to think the war was over. Because when you kill a devil, there's always another one waiting to rise. The world was quiet. Too quiet. It had been a week since we destroyed Mateo's empire, since I left the ruins of his mansion and the sinking yacht behind us. The bloodshed was over, or so I thought. But it wasn't. It was only the beginning. The city had gone into mourning, the streets still stained with the aftermath of our battle. Salazar's men were gone, his kingdom reduced to ashes, but there was an uncomfortable emptiness that gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't killed the devil at all. Mateo was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The phoenix, the legend, the symbol of rebirth, it was everywhere. In the newspapers, on the news channels, in whispers on the streets. People were talking about someone, something, that was pulling the strings from the shadows. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. It started with a call. A voice I didn't recognize, smooth as silk but cold as ice. "You think you've ended it, Ethan?" The voice purred, a hint of amusement in its tone. "You've only scratched the surface. The real war is just beginning." The line went dead before I could respond. That was when I knew. Mateo wasn't the endgame. He was the beginning of something much worse. Whoever was behind the scenes, whoever had orchestrated all this, it was only a matter of time before they came for me. I did some digging. There was no official name, but the whispers were there. The Phoenix. It wasn't a single person. It was a network. An underground society of ruthless power brokers, mercenaries, politicians, and criminals. The kind of people who could pull off the impossible and make it look like an accident. I wasn't naive enough to think I was the only target. This wasn't just about me. This was about taking down everything I had built, every person I had ever trusted. And when I heard the first real threat against Lopez, Diego, and the rest of my team, that's when I knew I had to act quickly. I had been operating with one rule: stay out of the shadows. But now I had no choice. The Phoenix had no face, no name, no leader, but its reach was endless. And now, they were coming for me. I went underground, moved fast, had to put my personal vendetta aside, because I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. This was a fight for the lives of everyone who had ever been loyal to me. The first blow came when Diego's sister was taken. She had been living in the safe house with her 2 kids. A group of masked men raided the building, burned it down, and left only ashes in their wake. They were sending a message. But it wasn't enough to break me. I was done hiding. It was time to hit back. We mobilized, every man, every resource at our disposal. Lopez was behind the controls of the chopper, Diego armed to the teeth, and I was ready for war. We stormed the Phoenix's first base of operations. It was supposed to be a meeting of the minds, but when I showed up with a squad of heavily armed men, it turned into something else entirely. Explosions lit up the sky, and gunfire echoed through the night. It was brutal. Bloodshed that would have made Mateo's reign look like child's play. We fought tooth and nail, clearing out rooms, taking out targets one by one. But they weren't easy to kill. The Phoenix didn't operate like any other syndicate I had faced. Their men were soldiers, mercenaries, trained to the highest degree, and they fought like it. Every room we cleared felt like we were walking deeper into the heart of the beast. By the time we reached the central office, the building was on fire. The air was thick with smoke, but there was something else, something cold. The man standing before me was exactly what I expected. He was tall, built like an ancient statue of power. His face was hidden by a mask, but his eyes, they were empty, cold, calculating. And in his hands, he held a blade. "You're here," he said, his voice deep and chilling. "To end me?" "I'm here to end you all," I replied, my gun trained on him. But he didn't flinch. He didn't even move. "You don't understand," he said, his voice almost a whisper now. "I'm not your enemy, Ethan. You've never known who your real enemy is." And then, before I could pull the trigger, the ground beneath us shook. The building was coming down. The Phoenix's plans were already in motion, and they had one thing left to do: kill me. The explosion hit, sending us all sprawling across the debris-strewn floor. I barely managed to get up, my ears ringing, my vision blurred. The building was collapsing around us. Lopez and Diego were already by my side, pulling me to my feet. But the Phoenix man? Gone. Vanished into the dust. We got out alive, but the fight had just begun. The Phoenix wasn't going to let us off that easy. They were everywhere. They had eyes in every corner of the world. And now, they knew who I was. This was no longer about revenge. This was about survival. And no matter what it took, I wasn't going down without a fight. The fire was still burning. I stood at the edge of the rubble, my thoughts clouded by the inferno behind me. It wasn't just the building that had fallen. It was everything I had worked for. The fight against Mateo, the bloodshed, the alliances forged in the flames, all of it seemed pointless now. But I couldn't afford to dwell on failure. Not now. Not when everything I loved, everyone I cared about, was in danger. The Phoenix wasn't some faceless organization. It was a living, breathing entity. And it was coming for me, piece by piece. I didn't have time to mourn the losses. The second I walked out of that building, the first wave of their operatives was already on my tail. They knew my every move. The Phoenix had spies everywhere, and it was clear they weren't taking any chances with me. We hit the ground running, moving like shadows through the streets. Diego had his contacts. Lopez had the military equipment. But none of it mattered when the Phoenix's grip stretched so far. They had eyes everywhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing a long game, baiting me into something worse than just survival. We needed answers. But where could we find them? We had no leads, no way of tracking down the elusive leader of the Phoenix. But there was one person who might know something. A name that came to me like a whisper: Veronica. Veronica was an enigma, a former Phoenix member who had disappeared off the grid years ago. A woman with a deadly reputation, and the only one who might hold the key to unraveling the Phoenix's plans. Finding her wouldn't be easy. It would be risky, but I didn't have much of a choice. We tracked her to an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was a place no one would look, hidden in plain sight among the abandoned factories. It was a perfect spot for someone trying to disappear. When we entered, the atmosphere was tense, thick with the stench of decay. Veronica had been here, but she was no longer alone. Before I could react, a group of men emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn. But they weren't Phoenix. They were something else. Mercenaries, hired guns. Ethan West, Veronica's voice cut through the chaos. She stepped into the light, her silhouette sharp and unforgiving. I should have known you'd come. Her hair was darker than I remembered, her face hardened by years of hiding. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't changed: fury, determination, and a dangerous level of intelligence. "You're still alive," I said, taking a cautious step forward. "I thought you were dead." "Most people do," she replied, her tone colder than the night air. "But I've always been good at making people believe what they want to believe." I didn't have time for pleasantries. The mercenaries were closing in, their guns trained on us. "Do you want help or a fight?" I asked, the tension mounting. She smiled darkly, pulling a knife from her belt. "Help sounds boring. I prefer a challenge." Veronica fought like a wild animal. She was fluid, precise, and deadly. No wasted movements, no hesitation. I had to admit, she was everything I remembered and more. But the mercenaries were relentless. We fought our way through the building, using everything we could to survive: guns, knives, even our bare hands. The fight was brutal. Every corner we turned, there was another obstacle. But we made it through, pushing forward until the last mercenary fell. With only a few minutes of silence between us, Veronica finally spoke. "Now that we're done playing," she said, wiping the blood from her blade, "what do you want from me, Ethan?" "I need to know who's behind the Phoenix," I said, my voice steady. "I need to understand why they're coming for me." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't get it, do you? The Phoenix isn't just an organization. It's an idea, a movement. They don't answer to one person. They answer to the system. They're the shadow in the corner of every empire, every government, every corporation. They're everywhere." I felt a chill in my spine. "So, I'm fighting an idea?" "Exactly," Veronica said, her voice grave. "And you're not the only one. The Phoenix has been pulling strings for centuries, shaping history from the shadows. You've just become a pawn in a much bigger game." I wasn't sure if I was ready to accept what she was saying, but there was no time to question it. Veronica had been in the game long enough to know the rules. And now, she was offering me something I didn't expect. I can help you, she said. I've been tracking the Phoenix for years. I know their weaknesses, their lies. But it's going to cost you. I raised an eyebrow. What do you want? She stepped closer, her eyes glinting with something dangerous. I want your soul, Ethan. I want you to make a choice. Join the Phoenix or destroy it. But there's no middle ground. You'll either rise with the ashes or burn with them. The offer hung in the air, a silent challenge that could break everything I had fought for. There was no easy answer. I had fought too long to get here, sacrificed too much. But the Phoenix wasn't something I could just ignore. It was a force too powerful, too pervasive to let go. If I joined them, I would be part of something larger than myself. But if I destroyed them, I would risk everything, including the lives of those I cared about. The decision wasn't simple. It wasn't even clear. But I knew one thing. If I was going to survive, I had to rise above the ashes. The weight of Veronica's offer crushed me. Could I really take on the Phoenix? Or was I just another player in a game too big for anyone to control? I looked at her, my mind racing with the implications of her words. There was a part of me that wanted to tear the Phoenix down, expose the rot behind their mask. But another part of me wondered if I was already too far gone. Could I even trust Veronica? Or was she just another dangerous player? We stood in the warehouse, surrounded by the fallen mercenaries. Their bodies littered the floor, a reminder of the battle we'd just survived. But the battle was far from over. You'll need more than just me to take them down, Veronica said, her voice steady, calculating. The Phoenix isn't going to roll over just because you show up with a knife in your hand. I nodded. She was right. But who else could I trust? Lopez? Diego? They had their own agendas, their own goals. And I had learned the hard way that no one was truly on my side. Not for long. But as I turned to leave the warehouse, a figure emerged from the shadows, someone I hadn't expected to see again. You're still alive, West, said the familiar voice. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I'd recognize that voice anywhere. It was the same voice that had once betrayed me. Agent Carter, I said, my tone flat. I didn't expect you to come crawling back. Agent Carter was once a high-ranking member of the CIA. She'd worked with me during the first battle against the Phoenix, only to disappear without a trace. I thought she was dead, or worse. But now, standing in front of me, I realized she had been playing a long game, and she had her own reasons for returning. I didn't come back to crawl, West, Carter said, stepping closer. I came to finish what we started. Her words hung in the air, charged with meaning. Was she here to help, or to manipulate? I wasn't sure, but I had no other options. You want to take down the Phoenix? I asked, trying to read her intentions. I'm already in deep with them, Carter confessed. But I don't trust them. They've been using me, just like they've used you. And now I'm ready to burn the whole system down. I couldn't believe it. Carter had been one of the Phoenix's most loyal agents. Could I trust her now? Or was this another trick? But with nowhere else to turn, I made a decision. All right, Carter. Let's burn it all down. We formed an uneasy alliance, a mix of desperation and mutual hatred for the Phoenix. Veronica had her contacts, Carter had her CIA resources, and I had my skills. Together, we began piecing together a plan to strike at the heart of the Phoenix. It wasn't going to be easy. The Phoenix's reach was vast, and their network was designed to survive even the most brutal attacks. But we had something they didn't, the element of surprise. We made our way to the Phoenix's headquarters, an abandoned government building on the outskirts of the city. The perfect place to hide in plain sight. The closer we got, the more I felt the weight of what we were about to do. Taking down the Phoenix wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message. A message that the system couldn't control us. That we were the ones pulling the strings now. I looked at Veronica and Carter. We go in, take them by surprise, and burn it all to the ground. Veronica nodded. No mercy. Carter's face was set in stone. This ends today. We breached the perimeter without a sound, cutting through the security like a blade through paper. The Phoenix's operatives were trained, but they weren't expecting us. We moved swiftly, clearing rooms, taking out guards, and gathering intel as we went. The deeper we went into the building, the more I realized how intricate the Phoenix's operations were. They had eyes in every corner of the world, pulling the strings behind every major event. And we were about to tear it all down. At the heart of the building, we found the Phoenix's inner sanctum, a high-tech control room filled with monitors, data, and high-ranking operatives. But the man standing at the center wasn't just another agent. He was the leader of the Phoenix. He looked at us with cold, calculating eyes, his expression unwavering. You think you can destroy the Phoenix? You're just a few ants, crawling around in the dirt. The Phoenix is an idea, a force that cannot be stopped. I stepped forward, my gun aimed squarely at his chest. I don't care about your idea. I'm here to end you. He laughed. You really think this is about me? The Phoenix has always been bigger than any one person. It's a system, West. It's the system that runs this world. You can't kill it. You can only burn yourself trying. The room was heavy with tension. The leader of the Phoenix was confident, almost smug in his belief that we were powerless. But there was one thing I knew. He underestimated us. Maybe you're right, I said, lowering my gun slightly. But the system doesn't control us anymore. We control it. With that, I pulled the trigger. The Phoenix leader collapsed, his blood staining the floor. The Phoenix was burning, but the fire was only beginning. After the fall of its leader, the organization had splintered. Chaos swept through its ranks as power struggles erupted, and I knew the end was near. But I also knew that nothing ever truly ended with a simple kill. Not when something as massive as the Phoenix was involved. We'd taken down their heart, but their power was far from extinguished. The system was still in place, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Veronica and Carter stood at my side as we made our way through the wreckage of the Phoenix's headquarters. Bodies lay everywhere, the result of our attack. But in the aftermath, the silence was deafening. You did it, Veronica said, her voice tinged with disbelief. You really brought it all down. We did it, I corrected. This was a team effort. But even as I said those words, something gnawed at me. The Phoenix might be shattered, but there were still pieces left behind. Pieces that could rebuild. I needed to act quickly, before those fragments turned into a new threat. Where do we go from here? Carter asked, her tone more serious than it had been throughout the operation. Now, we finish it, I said, my resolve hardening. The Phoenix may be dead, but the people behind it, the ones who think they can just hide in the shadows, they need to be exposed. With the Phoenix's infrastructure dismantled, we turned our attention to the remaining fragments. Information was the key, and the dark web was where we could find the answers we needed. I sat at the terminal, my fingers dancing across the keyboard, breaking into encrypted networks and hidden servers. Veronica kept watch, while Carter scoured the building for any other potential threats. Minutes turned to hours as I sifted through the data. There were countless names, dates, and locations, all part of a much larger picture. The Phoenix had its roots everywhere. In governments, corporations, even in the very systems we thought we trusted. But there was one name that kept popping up, a name that made my blood run cold. The architect? The one who had orchestrated the Phoenix's rise and fall. The one who had been pulling the strings all along. I knew then that the battle wasn't over. The architect had been playing a far more dangerous game than I had realized. The Phoenix had just been a tool, a means to an end, and now that end was close. The more I dug, the more I realized how far-reaching the architect's influence was. They weren't just pulling strings in the shadows. They were at the top, controlling everything. No one was safe from their reach. I turned to Veronica and Carter. We have a target. The architect. Veronica's expression darkened. You know who they are? Not yet, I replied, but we're going to find out. And when we do, we end this. The race to find the architect was a desperate one. With each passing hour, the shadow grew larger, and I could feel the pressure building. The Phoenix may have been a network, but the architect was the virus at its core, and I had to destroy it. We tracked down every lead, followed every clue. The trail led us across borders, through layers of lies and deception. But the closer we got, the more we realized how powerful this entity really was. We had nothing left to lose, and that made us dangerous. After weeks of searching, we found it. A high-security facility buried deep beneath the surface of a remote island. The architect's base of operations. The island was heavily guarded, and getting inside would be no easy feat, but we had one advantage: surprise. No one expected us to come after them, not with everything that had already happened. And that's how we were going to win. The air was thick with tension as we made our way toward the core of the facility. We had cut through layers of security, but now it was just the three of us against an entire army. But it didn't matter. The architect was our target, and nothing was going to stop us. As we reached the heart of the facility, I found myself face to face with the person I had been hunting for so long. The architect wasn't who I expected. They weren't some faceless figure, hidden behind a network of faceless agents. The architect was someone I knew. "West," the architect said, their voice calm and steady. "I've been waiting for you." I stood in shock, my gun raised but trembling in my hands. The architect wasn't just anyone. It was someone I had once trusted, someone I had once believed in. "Why?" I asked, my voice low, filled with betrayal. "Why did you do it?" The architect's face remained unreadable. "Because the world needs order, West. Chaos is not the solution. The Phoenix was always meant to be more than just an organization. It was a vision, a way to bring true power to the world." "You're insane," I spat. "I'm the only one who sees the bigger picture," the architect replied. "I gave you a choice, and you've wasted it. You'll never understand what I've done." I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The architect was a monster, a person who had used countless lives to build their vision of order. But I knew that killing them wouldn't end the war. It would only create a new one that could be just as brutal and unforgiving. I lowered my gun. "This ends now." With that, I pressed the button on the detonator in my hand. The facility exploded in a wave of heat and chaos, the flames consuming everything in its path. The explosion echoed through the island like the roar of 1,000 storms. Fire consumed the facility, and smoke rose into the sky, signaling the end of a chapter. The architect was gone. The last thread of the Phoenix burned to nothing. But as the dust settled, something within me couldn't shake the feeling that we had merely cut off one of many heads. Aftermath. Veronica, Carter, and I emerged from the ruins, our faces covered in ash, our bodies bruised but alive. The facility had been leveled, and any trace of the Phoenix's network was gone. The architect's influence, however, lingered in my mind. We had won, but at what cost? What had we really accomplished? The Phoenix was gone, but we had left behind the very power structures the architect had manipulated. We were just three individuals against an entire system. "Is it over?" Veronica asked, her voice quiet. "For now," I answered, my eyes scanning the horizon. "But there's always more to do. Always more to fight." Carter looked at me, her expression unreadable. "You'll keep going, won't you?" "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I can't stop now. Not until we rebuild what was destroyed." We returned to the city, but nothing felt the same. We had dismantled a force that threatened the very foundations of society, but the work was far from finished. I knew that the people in power, the ones who had hidden in the shadows all this time, would rise again. They always did. But I was no longer the man who had started this journey. I had been changed, hardened, perhaps, and maybe that was what was needed to rebuild. Veronica and Carter stood with me, as they always had. Together, we would create something new, something stronger, a new order to replace the one we had destroyed. It was strange to think about how far we had come. The world had almost crumbled under the weight of corruption, power, and secrecy. But now, there was a chance to rebuild what had been broken, to create something better. I sat alone that night, overlooking the city. The lights glittered below, a stark contrast to the darkness we had just faced. But even in that darkness, there was hope. For every shadow, there was light waiting to emerge. "I thought we'd never make it," Carter said, her voice breaking the silence. "We did," I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. "We made it." The Phoenix had risen from the ashes, but now it was time for something new to emerge. A new chapter, a new story. The old ways were over, and the future was ours to shape. We had been the ones who ended the reign of the Phoenix, but we weren't done yet. We were the ones who would build something that would last, something that would stand for justice, for truth, and for the future. And as I looked out at the city below, I knew one thing for sure. The real fight was just beginning. The end.